Men's college basketball this year, it has really, really lived up to the hype. We have the number one seed changing on a weekly basis. We're seeing the rise of these smaller schools making a push. We're seeing some what were former top schools having a humble year, Villanova, for instance, and so much fun in between. Conference championships are just about to take place. And let us talk all things men's college basketball as we approach Selection Sunday and get ready for March Madness. So, with us today here in the productive men's college basketball, so we have Alex Ranniello and Brady Gutierrez returning. What's up, guys? Good to see you again.
How's it going?
What's up, man? Happy to be back. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then we have Hayden Nadler joining this team
Morning.
as well. Great to see you again, Hayden.
Great to see you too.
All right. So fun stuff ahead. And as I said, don't forget, 3 years ago, the tournament was completely canceled. And look how far, and we know what happened. There was this pandemic. And look how far it's come since then. And as I mentioned, it seems that I would love to you chime in. It feels that there isn't a real clear favorite in this tournament this year. I know people like Houston, people like Bama, and UCLA, for instance, but it seems to be up for grabs right now. Don't you guys agree as a whole?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So
a lot of parity this year.
So I figure the best way to go through it is go through these major conferences. Then, as I mentioned, then the D1 committee, since we're doing early enough, release their projected top 16, and we'll go from there and breaking down all these major schools and having a lot of fun with it. So let's go through each major conference and let us get you all ready to fill out your brackets in a couple of weeks. So let us start with the Big Ten Conference. And the Big Ten Conference, particularly this year, I think people would like to say it seems like this entire conference has like a solid 8 to 10 teams that can make it. We have Purdue making an impact. Indiana trying to make their strides with Mike Woodson, trying to give them legitimacy again. It seems Indiana really hasn't had that presence like they used to with Bobby Knight. Who would have thought like teams like Northwestern and Maryland doing really well? Iowa has been falling a little bit, but they're hanging in there. And then we have other teams that are looking good and not so much the case, whether it's an Ohio State that is underachieving. Wisconsin isn't the same. Penn State has had a down year. A lot is going on in the Big Ten this year to start it off. So out of these schools I've mentioned and some others, which ones are really eye-opening for you guys, talking all things Big Ten right now?
I mean, I think one of the schools that you have to look at too is Rutgers. I feel like they've had a pretty good year. They were usually known as a college football powerhouse where they get the McCourties played at NFL there. They had before the whole domestic violence incidents. They had Ray Rice. I've bet a lot of pros for the NFL. Rutgers, it's perennially known as a football school, but I feel like the last couple of years they've actually done pretty well in basketball. Last year, I believe they made the tournament as well. I think I even want to say they won a game. They won a game in the NCAA tournament recently. One of the last 2 years they've been pretty good recently over the last couple of years. This year they're 18-11 in the Big Ten. I think they're going to make the tournament as of right now. They're in bracketology. They're projected to be in. I think as like a 10 seed, anywhere from 7 to 10 in that range. Definitely they've been very surprising this year. And I think another team too that people are going to take a look at, and although they were one of the first 4 out right now, but actually has really surprised people is Penn State. Micah Stroudsbury, their coach, they've done a terrific job this year as a basketball program. They haven't been very good in a while, so it's nice to see them kind of get back to relevance, be able to compete with a lot of these schools. They have right now, Penn State is they are currently right now for basketball, actually, which is I want to say about 18-14 around there, or they're around that. They're around
14 and 12.
So yeah, they've had a very good record this year, Penn State. So I feel like that's one of the schools where they have a new coach, Shrewsbury. Their coach could get another job offer after that to lead a Big Ten program. He's done a great job at Penn State.
With these conference tournaments, I mean, there's always a shakeup because You got a lot of teams that split the regular season record with these teams. There's a lot of cannibalism all through the conference. I think the odds-on favorite's always going to be Purdue. The way they're structured, Zach's been dominant all year, 21-12, blocking 2.5 shots a game. They are the odds-on favorite, 15-3 in conference play. But I mean, just in terms of spoiler alert for the conference in particular, I'm looking at Maryland, I'm looking at Northwestern, but I really ultimately I do like Indiana because at the end of the day, you have to have a guy who's league ready, who's going to step up and rise to the occasion, and that's exactly what I see. That's exactly what I see with Trace Jackson Davis. He's just been stellar all year. He's been the only guy that they've had a response for across this entire conference in terms of the big marquee games that are being played. Every time I see him at Indiana Stadium, he's like just all over the boards. He's been dominant, 21 a game, 11 rebounds, 2.8 blocks. I think if you put him head to head with Zach Edey, whether it's the semifinal or the final for the conference tournament, I think they could play spoiler.
Yeah, I'm actually all in Indiana this year too. I feel like they match up pretty well with any of the teams in the field right now. I feel like they could play spoiler. They have a NBA head coach Mike Woodson, who I definitely feel like has really made them into a powerhouse. Like you said before, they have Trace Jackson Davis, who's been very good. They have a pretty good passer at Jalen Hood. Shafino, he can pass the ball a little bit. He's got some good lane on the court, good lane vision. So I definitely feel with those two guys, they could be a force to be reckoned with.
And before we pass over to Brandon, I just want to shout out to Illinois too, because I looked down their win loss column, and they had some really surprising wins all through the regular season. So I think that they could really pull the firepower if need be when it comes to this conference play.
Yep. So for like the Big Ten, I think the three of my bigger teams, I would say number one, Purdue. Big fan of Zach Edey. That team is amazing. I love watching him play. Big men are key importance in college basketball, especially when it comes down to defense and offense. If you can dominate the box, you can really take teams out. But I think the only struggle Purdue is going to have going into the tournament is I think it's well known that when it comes to March Madness that it's all about the guard play. So I really think that Purdue's guards are going to need to step it up because they're not going to go against guards in their conference. They're going to go against like probably the top guards in the country. And that can be really shake them up. Zach is not going to be able to do that on his own. I think Maryland is another big one for me. They did pretty well in the conference. I think the conference standing is 11-7. I don't know what their overall is, but
29.
they're a great team. Okay. And they're a great team. They know, like, they just impressed me very much. And other than that, like the one underdog team I'm going for, which I feel like they've made it so many times, and I think they're gonna make it again, is Michigan. I think they started out rough. I think they're trying to found their footing now. They're tied up with Michigan, with Maryland in the conference, so I think they can put up a fight depending on who they go up against. But I think they can make round one.
I actually feel like Michigan is on the outside looking in right now. They would probably be one of my first four out. I don't feel like they have enough quad one wins right now, and they're out of conference strength of schedule. I don't necessarily love, so they would be one of my first four out. But depending on who you ask, that personally, I think them and UNC, I feel like would be two of my teams that are the first four out.
Matt,
well, UNC. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, Matt. Before we proceed, Brandon, do you want to check your audio a little bit? It's kind of muddy. It might be the AirPod. It could just be me too, but that's what I'm just here. It sounds a little fuzzy. Sorry, Matt.
But you're good. You're good. But as you were fixing that,
Hello.
You're good. You're good. We'll take a. We'll fix that after this segment. But
okay.
Just finishing your point, Brandon. You were saying.
Oh yeah. So like you were saying about UNC, I think just UNC was something that was unexpected from what we saw last year and how strong they were. Especially with their senior players coming back, and you would think that team would do well, but I definitely agree with that. I think they're looking from the in out, and they're gonna definitely get knocked out really early.
Speaking of speaking of the Big Ten, do we think Fred Hoiberg is coming back as the coach next year? Because I feel like they're going to look at the Nebraska's going to look for a new coach next year. Fred Hoiberg has not done the job in Nebraska. He's honestly his overall record there is pretty lackluster. And I feel like they could be looking for a new coach next year.
And they can't win and they can't win when they're not on their home court either. They're really bad at having a tough time there.
Like, do we feel like one of the guys maybe from the NBA, previously assistant? Like, I mean, Quinn Snyder took the job.
It could happen. I definitely think another thing we can look at is if it depends on who after the tournament, if any of these coaches, because I definitely think there's going to be a couple of coach stir-ups that are going to happen. So it depends on who they can get at that point and the strength of their program.
I think Nebraska's not really, it's not a hot marquee landing spot in basketball. So it's kind of hard to entice a former NBA guy. I think that this is one of those grassroots from the ground up organizations. So I think they're going to have to get a local guy or someone who's made their, inroads through the lower D1 and D2 programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, right now, Fred Hoiberg in his 4 years is 39 and 81 at Nebraska. And that's just not going to cut it. I mean, that's not saying they were ever a basketball school, but that's pretty rough, right. Especially when you see the job what the guy at Penn State has been doing right now to turn them around.
All right, we're gonna. Oh, sorry, Brady, you finish your point?
No, I was just gonna say that the difference between the difference of program. Penn State, very big, well known. I think that everything against Nebraska is exactly like what Alex is saying. Smaller program, not really where anyone really wants to go to school. Big players are not even looking at Nebraska, so it's kind of like a downhill fight for that head coach. So
yeah, but the last time Penn State made a tournament, the last time Penn State made a Final Four was 1954. They had their last NCAA tournament appearance was 2011, so it's not like they've had a ton of success either at Penn State.
Yeah, and it's not the 70s Nebraska anymore. They got huge NFL players from there, but times are changing, and it's all about with NIL deals. Right, it's free agency at this point. So how much can you really pay these players? And we're gonna quickly take a very quick break to fix Brandon's audio, and we'll be back in literally a second. All right, we fixed Brandon's audio. The power of technology, right? Great to see you, crystal clear. So as you were talking about North Carolina, might as well switch to the ACC really quick. So Duke. They're not a team to hate anymore, despite being undefeated in the post-coach, despite being undefeated at home in the Coach K era. After UNC got their last one against them, they've been rocking and rolling. We mentioned the Tar Heels. Looks like they'll be able to sneak in the tournament, but it'd be nice to secure it with a great conference, with a deep run in their conference championship. But other teams to notice, Miami's been doing really well this season. At one point, I believe they were a top 5 team at one point being ranked. We have Virginia playing well this year. Clemson trying to make a push. And some other teams that look like a complete joke. Louisville has lost their stride since their big scandal.
4-24. They're terrible.
Really bad. Notre Dame has had a tough year. Georgia Tech, even though they haven't really been a good college basketball school, but mainly the North Carolina teams are staying in it. But obviously the big one is Pittsburgh this year, and I believe they can be a team that can make like a deep Sweet 16 run. But going off more of what UNC's been doing, how do we feel about UNC and Duke first? They were both Final Four teams. UNC made it to the made it to the championship, and ultimately won the thing. And do we see them repeating as champions, or at least making a deep run with their head coach, who's been impressing? And I should know this, he's blanking my mind, but
Hubert Davis.
Hubert Davis, but
Hubert Davis is the coach for UNC. The coach for Duke is coach for Duke.
John Shire.
John Shire, yeah.
So what do we think about these two teams that were Final Four teams last year?
I mean, UNC, like I said, has really been a disappointment this year. They have not really brought the same fire, especially when they had a lot of returning seniors. So they've really been a disappointment a little bit last year. Maybe they're going to get going if they beat Duke. They get another quad win on their resume at UNC. That could be the game that that gets them into the NCAA tournament. But right now, if they don't beat Duke, I would say they're one of the first 4 teams out. Like they only have one quad one win right now. Their strength of schedule. They're I don't exactly love their I mean, the only thing they have going for them right now is that they have the 18th best out of conference schedule and a 17th strength schedule overall. But if you combine that with the fact they only have one win, it's really it's going to be hard to get them in the field unless they win a game or two in the conference tournament. If they win a couple of games in the conference tournament, or if they beat Duke this coming week, then that could flip the narrative. But right now, I would say they're one of the first 4 teams out.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to hand it. Sorry, I want to hand it over to Goo first on this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I agree with that 100% with the UNC take. I don't know what happened to them, especially with Bacot, I think it's
Bacot, Andre Bacot.
Bacot. Yeah, Andre Bacot. He has had one turnaround season. I don't know what happened. He went from being absolutely phenomenal last year to this year not looking very comfortable on the court. UNC is going to struggle. I don't know what they have to do to make it to even make it for like far into the tournament. Duke, I feel like is still pretty good. I think they're in their rebuilding stages. You know, the program is slowly changing, new head coach, stuff like that. So I think they'll do well. I don't think they'll go far in a sense, but I think and they'll be back at their stride, I think, in the next like 2-3 years. I think go ahead.
My question to you is for like UNC is like, do you think that their lack of quad one wins outweighs the fact that they have such a strong in conference and out of conference schedule for the season? Like, do you think that would outweigh the lack of signature wins they may have, or the fact they only have one quad one victory? Would that be something the selection committee would look at?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's because they only had one quad one win, and the fact that we can look at their conference right now, and right now the ACC is, I wouldn't say is the strongest conference out of all. Right now, like I said, a lot of those teams in there are in the rebuilding stages. Louisville being another team that was so good like 5-6 years ago, and now it's completely. The program has completely went down and I think they're dead last in their conference. So I think there's not enough. I don't think there's not a big enough challenge in that conference that will push them to show that they're going to go far. I think like a team like an Alabama or even a Virginia at that point in that same division, I think Virginia would wipe them.
One of the things I don't think people are looking at enough, like in terms of like UNC's like schedule, like they only have one quad one victory versus UVA. That was the team they beat. That was a quad one victory. That being said, like they did beat the College of Charleston, who right now is 28-3, and one of their only 3 losses was versus UNC. So I feel like that is something that should be highly considered. It may not be a quad one victory because the conference College of Charleston plays in. That being said, College of Charleston's like 28-3. Like, you don't think that constitutes a quad one victory, even though it may not be considered a quad one technically in the RPI? Like, will the selection committee look at that and say, boy, one of their wins is versus the College of Charleston team that is 28-3?
I definitely think that'll be a variable. I don't think that it will necessarily sway their full decision, but I definitely think they'll look into the fact that it is a quad one victory. And, even though that it's not a strong quad one victory, it's still, like you said, it's still considered one. So you have to give credit where credit's due at that point.
Yeah, I mean, technically right now, like I think because I technically think College Charleston right now is in the quadrant 2 because of the conference they play in, but it technically should almost be considered a quad 1 because of their record and what they've been able to do this season.
How do we like Pittsburgh and Miami? I really think Pittsburgh can make a deep run. They know how to score, really good on defense. I think they've been really impressing me, especially over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, they're impressive as a second tier team. I think that the overall, like not to bear the lead here, but I think that the overwhelming, medical examination of this conference this year is that just the top tier dogs are just not up to their stuff this year. That's why you see kind of this vacuum of power at the top with Pittsburgh, Miami, and Virginia kind of taking over the reins. I've watched Virginia 6 games this year. They can't throw a shot into the ocean. Miami, they have serious athletes that they're long and they could stretch the floor, but they're nothing really to run home about. Like I thought they were impressive early in the year. I think once you got later into the season, they blew a lot of games that should have been layups, no pun intended. And I think that Pittsburgh is impressive in conference, but just overall in the broad on the bigger stage, I just don't know how they're going to stack up, with a lot of these other major programs. I think that what's going on is that you're seeing almost, it's too early to call it a crisis, but it's a crisis in transition of power where you have a new coach, John Shire, a second year Hubert Davis, and I'll even hearken this over to the coach who's escaping my memory at Villanova, taking over for Jay Wright. Year two,
Kyle Neptune.
Yeah.
So, again, like on paper, it should be a no-brainer that they should just be continuing the legacy of the success that they had with those former guys in their recruitment class. And they're not necessarily producing, because you got to remember the first 2 years should be the immediate success, and then you should see a drop off. So it's got to be a little alarming to see Duke and North Carolina take a step back, particularly with North Carolina being behind NC State of all teams. My God.
Yeah, I actually think NC State has actually been pretty surprising this year. Like I actually think that's a team people should be really concerned with. I think NC State can score the basketball this year. I definitely feel like with that team they actually are a team that could surprise a lot of people. I actually like Tarquavian Smith. That's how you pronounce it? Tarquavian?
Your guess is as good as mine, but I think that's really
he's a pretty good guard, actually. I like watching him play.
Yeah, Tarquavian
and I feel like they have a very good 1-2 combo between Jarkel Joyner and Tarquavian Smith. I feel like that 1-2 combo is going to be very interesting to watch moving forward. And I feel like that's a team that could make a Sweet 16 run, actually.
The coaching dilemma with the Blue Bloods, I think, is the most disconcerting story that is kind of the underwriting behind what's going on with the ACC this year.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to talk about that a little bit too in the Big East, because there's a couple of coaches there that I feel like are not hitting the mark either in terms of the big names. Big East has had that.
All right, so I want to talk about the SEC really quick, which houses the University of Alabama Crimson Tide, who have been making noise on and off the court. Now, of course, there's other teams you can be impressed about. Texas A&M's played well. Kentucky has been holding it down. Tennessee's looking good.
You know what I'm also impressed with too? I want to say Missouri. Missouri's been pretty good there in the SEC, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they've had a pretty good
last
year.
Two.
Yeah, Missouri's been good. So.
Been killing it on the home stretch, but obviously the big thing with Alabama with this run, with their coach Nate Oates, they really, if there was a team that would be a favorite, is probably them. But we know what's going on. They've had one of their players, Darius Miles, who was allegedly a part of this homicide, when he is detained at this moment, and their big player Brandon Lee, who allegedly brought the gun. Now Darius wasn't the one shooting it. I guess it was. Brandon Miller. Sorry, did I say Brandon Lee? Whoops. Brandon Miller allegedly was a part of this plot as well. Now I can't remember the third person then who allegedly pulled the trigger, but obviously a mutual friend with Darius. But despite all of this, Brandon Lee has been playing well all season long, and people have compared him to a young Kevin Durant. And the big thing here is, are they going to let him play? It seems like that both Alabama law is protecting him from not getting charged, and the school itself, the athletic director and president, are letting him play. That seems to be upsetting everybody but the fans of the Crimson Tide, and I guess that's going to be a factor in this coming through. So assuming that they're going to keep it the way it is, do we see Bama taking the SEC and becoming a number one team in this tournament and making an impact here and maybe making a really deep run?
I think I think this is all contingent upon, like you said, Matt, with the status of of Brandon Miller and like what's going on, because obviously like 19-8, he's the lead guy on this on the Serpent, and I
And
think
he's
that
not phased. He's not phased at all. I think that's one thing to take
why,
account.
bro, he's a killer.
I think didn't he sat out? He sat out last night, the last game. I'm pretty sure. Brandon
I
Miller.
mean, did you guys see the pat down they did of him? Oh my god, that was so bad.
On
That was-
Saturday. Yeah. Now
oh my
people said
God.
that was
That
happening
was
all
so
season long.
I'm sorry, that was so tasteless. Like it was just an embarrassment. That was an embarrassment. The school should be fined or something because that was an embarrassment.
But I think, Alabama, whether they're at full strength or not, I think it's irregardless to say, I actually think that the best team in the SEC coming out of this tournament is going to be Tennessee. I think that
Really?
they're good enough to win the tournament in the conference. And in addition to that, I think they can make a deep run in the overall, round of 64. I think that having 4 scorers over 12 a game, being 10-6 in SEC play and hanging tough in those 6 losses, they had quality wins over Kansas, Texas, Auburn, and Bama and South Carolina as well. I think that you look up and down the list, they have just exceptional quality wins, and they have great coaching at the top. And I think that they can hang with anybody, particularly with Kentucky not being quite themselves this year, and the Aggies and everybody kind of being on the outside of 25 looking in. I think that competitively speaking, I think that they can handle Alabama even at full strength.
Do you think they have something to prove? Because last year they got knocked out in the round of 32. They were pretty high seed last year. They got knocked out in the round of 32.
They definitely do have a lot. They definitely do have a lot to prove, and I think that it's kind of ironic that we kind of see this this little war going on between you got Tennessee football and Alabama football this year, and now we have the same thing almost mirrored in basketball. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, they've actually never made a. It's kind of interesting actually. They actually have never made a Final Four in their history.
I know.
Which is hope maybe this is the year. I don't know. They haven't made the Elite Eight since 2010, which is pretty interesting because they've had a couple of pretty good years recently. 2022 they had a good year. The 2018, 2019 they were in Sweet 16.
Yeah.
So hope maybe this could be the year they turn it around. But I feel like do you feel like they're going to be weighing that pressure on them because the fact they haven't had a big run?
Look, Rick Barnes has been around the league for a long time, and I think that his time is now to kind of cash in and collect. And I think that he has the team in the roster to do it. Yeah,
no, I agree with you on that. He had a great run at Texas too, so he's a highly reputable and respected coach. Went to a Final Four at Texas, went to a couple of Elite Eights, so he's one of the coaches I feel like will lead them to the promised land eventually.
One team that's really been impressive, and they're only going to get better, is John Calipari leading the Wildcats into a good season after a rough start. But allegedly, they have the best recruiting class coming into next year, and I think it'd be essential for them to make a deep run too. Do we see anything going on?
Well, they're gonna have something major to prove last year, coming off that loss to St. Peter's. They're gonna be
definitely.
They're gonna be coming in like really with a guns ablazing. So that's definitely a team to watch for sure.
And how do you feel about Kentucky going into the next year?
Going into next year, I don't know if I think they have the number 1 recruiting class. I could be very biased. No, I definitely think that they have a strong class going into next year. I think they'll definitely be like a top 5 team with the people they're picking up. This year, I think they definitely have something to prove since the St. Peter's loss that ruined my bracket last year.
Then we all.
I think the big thing with Kentucky is they're coming up. I think they're coming off. I think they're on a 4-win streak right now. So I think they're in a good state. I think they got a positive mindset. I think they know that they can win. Big thing, like I'll mention again, I think it's really going to come up to those Kentucky guards. They need to play consistent, and they need to score. If they score and they play consistent defense, I think they'll have a good chance of making it back to like the Sweet 16, maybe the Elite Eight. We'll see.
Well, I think this is critical. This is a critical time for Calipari, because I hate to say a guy who's a Hall of Famer himself like being on the hot seat, but it's just they've really had a precipitous downfall in the past 8-9 years, just not being competitive the way they used to be, and I think it's proof in the way that you see Alabama rising up and you see Tennessee holding their weight, and all these other teams that used to be afterthoughts in the SEC kind of filling that void. I think it's a huge distraction, for Calipari. I think that this is kind of a year where you at least make up for the sins of last year. Try to get into the second round or into the Sweet 16, and if not, you go into next year with a full head of steam and you really put it all out there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, Calipari only has one national championship at Kentucky.
Yeah,
He's really honestly, he's only had one national championship and only one other. The two Final Fours. But one year we had the team with Anthony Davis in that team that went 38-1 and lost. They didn't even win the national championship. So I feel like he has been a little bit of a disappointment in the in March Madness. I feel like actually, where he hasn't won quite as much as what you would think for a guy who supposedly is thought of as one of the greatest coaches in college history.
Agreed.
Yep.
So let's go to the West Coast right now, and let's talk about the Pac-12 with a hot Arizona team, for instance. USC has been making some strides. UCLA, who, spoiler alert, I'm going to pick to be the national champion. They've won 8 in a row with some players who I think will make strides in the NBA. This Pac-12 team is looking really, really good as a whole in the conference, at least with their major teams, at least with their top teams, I should say. Are you guys excited for the Pac-12 like me?
I'm not a huge fan of the Pac-12. I feel like it's a little bit top heavy with UCLA and Arizona. Mm-hmm. The rest of the conference as a whole has been really, really down. You have Cal right now was 3-26. Oregon State, 10-19 after that one miraculous run they made to the Elite Eight. They haven't done anything besides that. Stanford's been pretty inconsistent. Colorado's been down. Like pretty much the entire conference has really been down, with the exception of the top 4 teams. Like the rest of the conference has been really a huge disappointment. So I don't really know. Yeah. It's hard for me to say that UCLA is really the best team and they're number 4 in the nation when like a lot of their victories aren't necessarily versus quad 1 teams. So it's kind of hard for me to say definitively that because of who UCLA has played that they're the team to beat. They look pretty good right now. I mean, they're 25-4, so I can't really.
They have been improving themselves the year.
But they also have lost this season already to Baylor and Illinois. Like they have a couple of their losses.
Yeah,
they beat Maryland. I mean, they beat Kentucky. That's great. But like, I mean, who have they really played outside of merely? Like
I can't name one quality win from UCLA. I think you took the words out of my mouth.
And they lost to Arizona too.
They lost to Arizona, USC, Illinois, and Baylor. And Illinois has fallen from where they were at the beginning of the year. Look, I mean, I would say that I'm a huge Mick Cronin fan. I liked him at Cincinnati. I believe in him as a coach for UCLA. I like Jaquez as a senior. I think that despite having the quality wins, I think that their resume still holds, and I think that they're gonna thrive even as a number 1 seed. Whether that means advancing through the Final Four or not. But again, like you said, they're very top heavy. It's really just a 3 or 4 man conference, and I think that the only team that really surprises me that I have questions about is Arizona State. But I know what their ceiling is. I know that they're kind of a 3rd round exit. I just think that they can make some disruptions and some noise in this conference tournament. I think that this is really between Arizona and UCLA, and I would give the edge to Arizona on the broad scale of the tournament.
Yeah, I would give it to Arizona too. But Arizona also almost lost last year to TCU in that 1-8 game. So it's really they haven't had a ton of success in the tournament recently, Arizona. But UCLA is one of those teams I feel like if they get a 1 seed, they could be on a huge upset alert in the 8-9 game. Like I don't even know if they're going to get to Sweet 16 personally.
They got 2 7-footers on defense. They score approximately 83 points a game as a team, which is top 20 in the country. And their quality wins are San Diego State, who's ranked, Creighton, Indiana, Tennessee, USC, UCLA, and Washington, which are all really solid wins.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think UCLA though I feel like is a team that should be looked at. Like I know Matt, you have them winning the national championship.
Jamie Jaquez, that's my guy.
I'm a little bit like I feel like that's a team in my bracket. I would pick to be on upset alert before even like the Sweet 16. Like I feel like they could lose the 8-9 game if that's a team I would put on upset alert. That's a team that could win the national championship, but I also feel like that's a team that could also lose in the round of 32.
It sucks
I feel
that
like they're a very hit or miss team.
it sucks that they won't actually have a tournament to keep playing and getting reps in. They've won the national Pac-12 tournament naturally like that, but yeah, I'm high on them. I think they play really good defense. I think they are a team that really has some good chemistry. I think that's the one thing that really impressed me, the chemistry amongst them. They don't have a lot of players just running to the NBA like that, and they've had reps. And I only hope now with this older squad that they can at least make a run for it. But I can also see with that in the Pac-12 having had too much competition against the higher ranked schools, which could be a problem, but maybe also with that, just play. The big thing we always like to compare with college basketball and the NBA is that it is more fundamentals with the game itself. There's clearly no ISO ball being played like that. So I only hope that team chemistry can take it deep, and I'll also get into that
Yeah, I
later
mean,
on.
in terms of like Arizona, like I'm definitely on board with Alex. Like they had a much stronger out of conference schedule. They already beat.
Hey, they had a
San
tough
Diego-
loss
they-
in that buzzer beater this Saturday,
Yeah, yeah.
though.
I mean,
Oh man, that was a great game.
I think one
I
of
went back
the
and watched the highlights.
I think one of the teams they beat earlier in the season. I'm not going to say who, but like I feel like San Diego State is going to actually one of my Final Four teams. Like I actually really like San Diego State this year. Like that's maybe a little of a ballsy pick, but like San Diego State, I love, and they beat them by 17 points.
There's always one
Like,
team that makes sense.
So like, I mean, they beat Creighton, who's in the top of the Big East. They beat them. They already beat Indiana. They beat Tennessee. So it's like Arizona. I feel like is definitely one of those teams where I would
Yeah.
I would definitely I think they're gonna be really good, Arizona.
I think Arizona's going to be good, and I think, like you said, I think pressure is the biggest thing against UCLA. I think UCLA is they need to be able to handle the pressure and know that they're going to come into this tournament with a really good seed, and that they need to take that first round serious, whether whoever they play, because I definitely see a chance they lose. Arizona, I think they're more established. I think they're more confident. They've been in those pressured situations as a team, and I think they know when it comes to tournament time that they know what they need to do, and I think they'll make it past the first two rounds or to the top 32.
Before we move on, I just took a peek at the power index. They have UCLA a whole 9 slots ahead of Arizona in the power rankings. So don't think that they're going to print that and put it in their locker room this week.
They probably are.
Like I said, if only they had an actual tournament game to go against each other, but we'll see what ultimately happens. So let us talk with two of the biggest fans of the Big East, and so let's talk about the conference there and Brandon and Alex. All right,
Yep.
the Big East really been trying to gain credibility over the past couple of years, and I think they've even with the some of the omissions they've had. So we have Marquette being on top right now. They have Xavier there, even though they've had some ugly losses, but still making some strides. Providence is still staying consistent. What a great, well-coached program. UConn, at one point at the beginning of this season, they were looking really, really good.
Number 2 team in the country.
14-0.
And then college basketball happened, had some really tough and ugly losses. Villanova hasn't been the same.
Yeah.
But some people think that they can, if they have a good Big East tournament, maybe they can sneak their way in there. The other thing too, Georgetown is just, it seems like the Patrick Ewing experiment is not working, and it's likely that he's getting fired after the season. But what were you about to say, Brandon?
I think he's making his way in the right direction. I think he needs more time. I think it's hard. You got to understand he's coming to a program where Georgetown wasn't anything great to come from, and I think he's taken the talent he has and he's done the best he can with it. I think if he was able to get better top recruits, I think Georgetown would be a better team in the Big East.
Oh yeah.
And you got to also look at how strong the Big East is and the teams that you're going against on a consistent basis. That it's hard.
I think the biggest story of the Big East, in my opinion, has to be like how disappointing some of these teams and coaches have been. Like Kyle Neptune was supposed to be a great hire at Villanova. He's been in a incredibly bad disappointment. Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall was supposed to resurrect them when he took over from St. Peter's. They've been incredibly disappointed, and don't even get me started in St. John's. Mike Anderson has
They're
been
not the same.
oh my God. They have one of the best centers right now in the Big East, and Joel Soriano. They have Posh Alexander. Like that's my team from New York, one of the biggest teams in New York. St. John's, and they've just have been like just very disappointing. They haven't made the tournament under Mike Anderson. He should be gone after this year. And also, like, it looks even worse with Kyle Neptune that they haven't done well at Villanova. Being that the predecessor Keith Ergo at Fordham is currently like I want to say 23-6 at Fordham right now. They're one of the top 3 teams in the Atlantic 10. They've been extremely good. So it makes Kyle Neptune look even that much more less impressive that someone just took over after you and is actually even better than where you were the year before. So
I want to turn a negative positive. I want to give some love to Shaka Smart at Marquette though, because he's really done wonders.
Oh yeah,
over
Shaka
there.
Smart's done awesome at Marquette. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
He's got great guards, man. He's a great coach for guards. He knows what he's doing. Very fast paced team, man.
Also too, like
very
Sean
aggressive.
Miller at Xavier has been really good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, Sean Miller's
My
been
only
great
thing with
over at
Xavier is, like I said, sometimes they've had some really bad losses in there. I mean, like losing to who is it? Was it their loss to Butler was really surprising a couple weeks ago. Sometimes they've had trouble holding.
They lost to DePaul.
Yeah, lost to
I-
DePaul. I mean,
That
We
was
lost
a
to DePaul and
very
Butler.
destructive loss right there. I don't know how you lose to DePaul, but yeah.
do we think that
was
in
really
this tournament that has historically have had some really ugly upsets, could they be on upset alert despite a mixture of really good success along the way?
So
Honestly, yeah, they are, but I honestly
Maybe
think
that.
like you can't look too far into that DePaul loss either because they did
Yeah.
play them again and they absolutely didn't, like dominated them. I think it was just a bad night of basketball for them. I just think it comes down to consistency level with that team. They need to be consistent every night, and it seems to be not working all the time for them. And
I
when they
feel
come
like
up,
a,
and if for some reason like they go up against Butler, they lose, but then they go up against like St. John's and they blow them out of the water like by 20 points. So it's
College
consistency
basketball.
for me.
the team
Yep.
that I feel like should be on upset alert definitely is Providence. They barely even beat Ryder, and he was in our conference. They only beat him by 1
Fake
point.
team.
They almost they
Fake team.
lost to St. Louis. They've lost to TCU. Like they should be on upset alert in my opinion.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah,
I
Providence,
100% agree with that.
I mean, Providence has also some really good wins too. Like they've beaten Creighton. Like they beat Creighton. They beat UConn. They beat Marquette. Like they have some pretty good wins. So they'll make the tournament. Providence. I just feel like
Oh yeah.
they should be on upset alert.
Who do you think
Well,
is going to ultimately?
I think ultimately the point of order here is that I just think it's a toss up across the top of this conference. I think there's we're splitting hairs when we're trying to grade and make understanding of the wins and losses with these because there's a lot of cannibalism in the Big East. A lot of these teams they get a chunk out of one another, but on against the field they perform well out of conference as well. I think that right now, if I had to put my money on a team to win Big East Conference tournament, I would actually put it on Xavier.
Oh, I put it on UConn. That's what I put it on.
Well, okay, I would put it on Xavier.
You're the man.
In the championship, if I have to be honest, if I have to be objective, but ultimately, I think that the most road ahead would probably be UConn in the tournament of 64. I think that Marquette is really phenomenal team. I think they're like number 5 in the country in assists per game, which means they spread the ball. They're selfless. They have 4 scores over 12 a game. And they have really quality wins. So I think that with what Shaka Smart's doing, I can't rule them out either. I think that there's just so much parity at the top of this conference where it's going to really make an amazing time for 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on with Shaka Smart though in terms of coach. I think he should be at the long list of coach of the year.
Yeah.
And I want to give love to that big from Providence, Hopkins or what's his name?
The Providence big?
Yeah, the big man.
Yeah, Hopkins. Bryce Hopkins. No, that's the point guard. O'Hare? Talking about?
Oh no, Hopkins. He said Bryce Hopkins, right? Bryce Hopkins.
No, Bryce Hopkins is the guard.
Well, either way,
I know
I'm
what you're talking about.
forgetting his name at the moment, but he's had a great year. I want to give him a shout out to Mr. MIA.
All right.
Let me go.
Quickly transferring over to the Big 12, we have Kansas, the reigning champions, just picking up where they left off, feeling good. Texas has been making some strides. Baylor's been really good, and Kansas State. Oklahoma was looking really good, and they have collapsed at the towards the end of the season. When it comes to the Big 12, is it just going to be a battle between Kansas, Baylor, and Texas? Maybe Kansas State can make some strides too, or do we see this going in a different direction?
I think this division's. I think like he was saying before, top. I think this is another division that's top heavy. I think really the big three: Kansas, Baylor, and Texas, and then you have Iowa there that I have as like a kind of a sneak, like a kind of a sneak pick. Iowa State, but yeah, I definitely think Baylor or Kansas are the ones that you really look at in that division. I think Baylor's like 22-8.
Yeah,
They're at home. They're insane. I think they're like 14-1 or something like that. They're a great team, and I think they have the willpower to make it into the tournament. And they've established in the past that they've done it with ease.
Yeah, don't forget about TCU as well. TCU's had a pretty good year under.
TCU. Yeah,
under Jamie Dixon. Jamie Dixon, former coach at Pitt, has done a great job at TCU.
Yep, definitely. I think the only thing with TCU is they had a little bit of a struggle inside conference play, but other than that,
yeah, their record in
TCU
conference play. I mean, they are 8-8 conference play, so yeah, that is.
Yeah, but TCU
agree.
always somehow makes a little bit of a show in the tournament in the 64.
Yeah, TCU basketball last year. I want to say they lost to Zona in the 1-8 game last year. I want to say they almost forced it overtime. They had a very good run last year. TCU.
I think there's another conference where you could see like a TCU or a K-State upset the top dog in the Jayhawks in the conference tournament. But I think it really comes down to really just Kansas, Texas, and Baylor actually having the long haul wherewithal to make it to the round of 8 or 16 or something. I think that this is a really loaded conference. I've seen a lot of great games this year where it came down to OT and to the final seconds of the fourth quarter. I think that a lot of these teams are really well coached. I know the coach for Baylor, Scott Drew. He's got championship pedigree at this point.
Yeah, he beat Gonzaga. I think 2 years ago. They won the COVID bubble year, right?
Yeah,
they beat the Jalen Suggs team, but they also beat him earlier this year in a special exhibition. And I think that Bill Self as well. I think he's looking to repeat and kind of cement his legacy. So he's going to have that chip on his shoulder too.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kansas State actually too. I feel like that's another coach of the year candidate that they have for Kansas State.
Kansas State?
Their first year guy, Kansas State. I
Yep.
want to say it was I'm trying to think of that coach. Jerry. I want to say it's like Jerry someone or. Well, yeah, they're.
I watched that game. Going back to when they upset, I think it was like week 5 or week 6.
Jerome Tang. He should be the coach of the year.
When they upset Kansas, and if you actually look and you break down the last 2 minutes of tape on that game, just the tenacity of the defense on K-State, it looks like they're just super well coached, super disciplined. They see the play 2-3 seconds before it happens. I think they could really make some noise in the conference tournament.
Yeah, and two, they have Baylor's associate head coach, Jerome Tang. He's associate head coach at Baylor. Yeah, he knows all their systems for Baylor. So that
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. That's definitely a good thing to have for Kansas State. And they also do have sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm looking at the quality wins that obviously like Baylor Baylor beat TCU, Texas, and Kansas at twice, and then they beat Gonzaga and UCLA, which is just like unheard of.
Yeah, Baylor.
Even the Virginia loss with TCU, it's like you can live with that because at the end of the day, you have senior guard leadership with Adam Flagler. And, with the conference play that they've had, when it comes down to these tight games, you have to have good free throw shooting. You have to have good ball handling. I think that that's going to be the difference in what takes Baylor over the top, well beyond the conference tournament.
And before we hit the rest of the mid majors as a whole, should talk about the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, with Houston, who could be a major favorite in this, winning 9 in a row, with some projected NBA stars on that team. But also Memphis has been playing well. Tulane will always make a stride. University of Cincinnati could make a run for
It's
it.
a good conference. The two teams that I feel like are a lock to make it this year are Houston and Memphis. But the rest of the conference, Wichita State has been a disappointment this year. They haven't been as good as they usually are. But yeah, that's a tough conference to predict because usually it's usually like a 2-team league. I feel like that conference as a whole has been a little bit weaker than whereas opposed to other mid-major conferences such as the Mountain West have picked up the slack, where that will be like a 3 or 4-team league as opposed to the American AAC, which is only going to get 2 teams this year. It's been a little bit weak, but I mean, if you're going to look at the mid-major conferences that have really been very, very good, I would say you have to look at the WCC and the WCC and the Mountain West have been 2 conferences.
Mountain West, yep.
Mountain West, yeah. The Mountain West has 3 teams right now that are going to make it. Probably you have San Diego State, who's honestly a sleeper team for the Final Four. I actually really like San Diego State. Boise State's 22-7, Nevada's 22-8, and Utah State's literally right there at 22-7. So you have 3 or 4 teams potentially make it, and New Mexico, even though Mexico's not going to make it because they have a 7-9 conference record, but they're 20-9 in the year. If they didn't have a couple of losses, that killed their season late, they probably would have been playing for an NCAA tournament right now with Rick Pitino's son as coach. So the Mountain West has been extremely strong, and I definitely feel like that's a conference that we're going to look at. But yeah, I mean, outside of really Houston and Memphis, I don't really feel like the AAC has been as great as it has been in the past.
Yeah, definitely. I think Houston is definitely a top 4 team.
Yeah, Houston's number one in the country right now.
Number one in the country for defense.
Houston's incredible. Yeah,
it's always been like that though. Like Houston is just a team that's ran the AAC for
and they have Kelvin Sampson, right? He's a great coach.
Yeah, they're 15.
I love Houston too. That's a team that can.
That's a no-brainer team right there.
That's a team I don't think I'm going to pick them in the Final Four because I feel like it's very hard to pick the number 1 team all season to make the Final Four because of the parity. But I mean, if I was just going based off knowledge and whatever, I would probably say that Houston is a team you should pick the Final Four.
What sells me is the defense. It's just that number 1 defense right there, and those guards and all that. Defense, if you have great defense, the offense is easy to them. So I think that's their number 1 strength. If someone can shut them down and and break through their defense, I think they have a good chance of beating them. But then again, it's hard. Like you said, it's very hard when it comes down to the Final Four right there.
Well, that's the difference. It's like when the game slows down and you get into the second round and whatnot, the round of 32 and 16, it's like you have to find ways to manufacture shots, and I think that this team can do it. They do have shooters, but what they resort to and rely on is the fact that they have 4 guys that can get you stops. They're long, they're tenacious. They all have over a steal and a half on the season for the year. I think that's a really huge upside, and this is a heavy rebounding team too, which people don't realize. And I think that rebounding is a really, really important undervalued skill set in the tournament too.
Branching off of the other mid majors, as Hayden mentioned, West Coast Conference and then the Mountain West itself, and the other teams I haven't mentioned, Gonzaga's been playing really well, and they're always a force to be reckoned with, even though they've been underachieving and had some tough losses in the tournament ultimately. But is there any other ones that have really impressed you? And also Mountain West, San Diego State, as you mentioned, is your a sneaky favorite here. But
yeah, I have St. Mary's looks very good too.
And is there, just thinking off the top of my head, you is there
Well,
any other conferences that have
yeah,
say,
there's
whether it's the American East? Wink,
there's
wink.
there's a couple there's a couple of teams there's a couple of teams that I can look at and say like, boy, they've been really impressive. But like, I'm looking at myself, I'm like, College of Charleston right now is 28-3. Like they've been absolutely incredible this year coming out of the Colonial. I know Oral Roberts hasn't lost a game in conference. They're undefeated in the conference. But like, that leads to my next point. Like, what do these teams honestly have to do to like make the tournament in like these conferences? Like, you're 28-3. Like, I understand like certain, you still have to beat who you play. Like, you're in the Division 1 for a reason. Like, Division 1 is a certain level. You're beating D1 teams every day. Like, a lot of times I don't really feel like there's as big of a discrepancy as people want to think between like the mid majors and the Power Five, because like every year you see a team like Evansville beat a Duke. You see it every year, like these
Well, let me push
small
back a little
schools.
bit, because the structure, the way the Power Five is set up, is that it is a hierarchy where you can opt in or opt out based on competitiveness year after year, your recruiting, your scouting. So I think that the eligibility becomes a race to get into those Power Fives, and if you're not, and you're in the recesses where you have to win your mid major and get your ticket punched to the tournament. I think that it resorts and boils down more to um, you know, any given team beating a team on any given day. I think that's what you see in the NFL and you see in college football. But I think more particularly you see it in the tournament of 64 because, like you said, and there's not really much a difference between the mid majors. However, consistency is king, and if you don't have consistency through the regular season, that's the difference between the wheat and the chaff.
Like I mean, for me, it's just hard for me because I feel like you really have to go like you have to go. You pretty much have to go 30-0 to make the NCAA tournament with some of these schools, and like I don't necessarily know that's necessarily right. Like and like like even so, like I'll give you another conference like the Conference USA. Like Florida
Yeah.
Atlantic's 26-3. You have North Texas who's 23-6. UAB who's 22-8. Like it's harder for a
But we
lot of these.
remember, but like we remember those teams like year after year, making deep runs. Who was the team from what was it, the Missouri Valley that made a giant run to
Loyola Chicago.
Loyola Chicago?
Loyola. Yeah.
Yeah. So like
With
they
Sister
wouldn't
Word.
be, but here's the thing, they wouldn't be who they were if they weren't playing in the Missouri Valley Conference because they outperformed their conference. They made a bunch of noise on the stage and they got hot at the right time. And sometimes that's all that is needed for these programs.
Like I had an idea. Like I was thinking, like you almost like I don't know. It's gonna get turned down by a lot of people, but like I had an idea where you would make like two separate tournaments, like one specifically for the top 50 mid-major teams, and then another like you'd split it into 100 teams. One specifically where the top 50 mid-majors would play, and then a number where you got the Power Five conferences, where if it's over a certain enrollment, where they would play in one tournament, and then the winner of each of those tournaments would play each other to see the de facto national champion. That's what I had a proposal of an idea. I don't necessarily think that would gain any traction, but that was just something
So
I
many
thought
extra
would make it
games.
more equitable.
So many extra games. That's the problem.
Yeah, extra games. And then you definitely are gonna have the people saying the mid major is gonna be an easier way into the championship. So you might see programs try to make their way into the mid major and transfer conferences to get
Right.
easy way into the championship. That's
And
the problem.
And you got to remember too. I look at the mid majors almost as like a casting stage for a lot of up and coming talent in the coaching staffs of these teams because we were talking about like Fred Hoiberg and being a replacement for him over in Nebraska. Well, guess what? A lot of the guys that are making inroads in the mid majors are probably going to get that job.
Well, that's what Shaheen Holiday he did the St. Peter's. Chris Beard, I'm pretty
Right.
sure was one of those before he got exiled from Texas for domestic violence. He was at Arkansas Little Rock.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and like, there's also one other thing I want to cover. I don't know if you guys are like familiar with this, but like, what do you guys feel about the NCAA like classification where if you transition into Division 1, you have to serve like a 3-year period? Because there's one conference right now. It's one of the worst conference in college basketball right now, the Northeast Conference. Two of the top 3
My
teams
brother's placed in that conference.
aren't even eligible to play in March Madness because they're classifying from a Division 2 to a Division 1, like Merrimack,
it?
Stonehill.
I was gonna say, yeah, Miramax that conference, right?
They're the two of the top 3 teams in the Northeast Conference, and they're not even
Central's
gonna
in
be
there
able to,
too.
they're not even gonna be able to play
Let's
in
go
the
Wagner.
they're not even gonna be able to play in the fucking March Madness because they transitioned from the
Shout
D2 to
out,
D1. I think that's ridiculous.
shout out to
What's the point of even being in the tournament then?
shout out, shout out to CCSU. Me and Brandon got a lot of friends over there.
It's,
Yeah, that's their conference right
Hayden,
there. Yeah.
it is cruel, but with so much money into this foray, and especially with the rise of NIL deals, I think it really is just a business decision. But you're 100% right. There's no reason why they should be omitted, especially if they can go toe to toe with these bigger schools, and especially a game like basketball, specifically men's college basketball. And again, not to bring up a point again where it's not ISO basketball, where it's really true team play. There are players who'll be better than others, but as a team, you should be able to at least go to toe with them if you're Division 1.
Like I'm giving you like another school, like University of New Haven could be in the Northeast Conference right now, and they would probably be. I'm not even kidding about this. They'd probably be one of the top teams.
How about Quinnipiac? Which conference is
Quinnipiac's
Quinnipiac in?
Quinnipiac's in the MAC right now. They're 19-10. They're having a pretty good year.
Can they make? You think they
Yeah,
will make a run?
I mean, if they beat Iona, which I think is possible because they beat them by 30 points early in their year, and if they win if they win the 4 or 5 game, yeah, they could make the tournament this year.
Anything is possible.
They have to make it this year, or else I think they're going to get a new coach because they're going to move on from Baker Dunley.
Because I remember Harvard, University of Harvard made it. I think two. Was it 2
Yeah,
years?
they made it 2 years ago, and then they
And now they're not even D1 anymore.
and then they decided to go Division 3 because
they went Division 3.
not saying anything against Hartford, Max. I know it's your alma mater.
No, it's fine. It's your points are
It was
valid.
not. It was not a program decision. It was actually. It was not a basketball. It was like a program decision. It was actually the school's decision.
Yep.
Yeah, the school made a decision.
Yeah, the school made that decision.
And guess what? That president announced this week that he's retiring. Like, it really is a cruel, sick joke like that. The minute you make the NCAA tournament for the first time ever, and then a few weeks later you're going D3 for honestly an unethical and a terrible economic decision. Yeah, I was a tour guide for the school, and I really liked that job a lot. I couldn't imagine promoting that and telling that with parents. That's just, I don't know.
There was a lot of problems with that because they had a lot of signees for the D1 program.
Yeah.
And they had to turn around and tell them saying, hey, well, you signed already and you're going to be playing D3 now.
That's absolutely unfair. Like, it's a
terrible
joke. And we've had one player make it to the NBA, and Vin Baker, and sad. And I'm sure Alex feels the same way. But quickly transition it to here. Pretty much hit every major conference we need to. And I just wanted to break down the projected top 16 teams. Now, the Division I Men's Basketball Committee shares its top 16 teams every year, and usually these are pretty accurate. Now, it may change, obviously, especially with conference championships week taking place, but usually these are pretty accurate. And as a whole, these aren't officially ranked from the AP top polls or the coaches polls. This is from the committee itself. And I figure the best way to do it is to go through each region, and I'm going to name the 4 schools. And do you think, 1, this is accurate? And 2, do you think any of these teams can make at least a deep run of some sorts? So if we start with the South region in Louisville, they project Alabama as the number 1 school. They think Baylor would be a 7th seed, Virginia would be a 10th, and then Indiana as a 13th. How do you feel about that?
Fine with the 3. Indiana is a little bit iffy for me.
Yeah, that's pretty low for what they've been changing around this year.
I wouldn't put them at 13th now.
I feel like they're a little too high for 13. I would actually lower them, Indiana.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah, I don't feel like they're as good as them. 13 overall seed. 13, like I feel like I think they're.
You mean like do you want them like a high like closer to 1 or?
I want them closer to I want them out of the top 16.
Okay, yeah, okay, I agree with that.
So as a top out of the top 16 in general, but not necessarily as the. So yeah, and then the way they do this, these could be the top 4 teams in the region as well. This is just way
Okay.
they think from the Sweet 16. I should have made that clear before.
Okay.
So there could be a Bama 1, Bama 1, Baylor 2, Virginia 3, Indiana 4.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I even feel like as like a 4 seed, like I don't like even as I don't know. I just feel like that's a little bit high. Like
They haven't done anything this season that makes them like stand out compared to
like
like
I
any of the
actually would
top
have them
teams.
as a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. So I wouldn't have them in the top 16 teams.
Do you think a Bama, Baylor, Virginia, Indiana could they meet in the Elite 8 from this conference? Do you think any of these teams
Indiana?
can, out of those
Oh,
4 teams, if they make it, if they run the course, do
yeah,
you think they can make
definitely.
the
I
Elite
think
8?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Alabama and Baylor are definitely in that conversation. Virginia, again,
I don't like Virginia
eh,
and
they might
Indiana.
make top 32, but I don't think they make the Elite
I
Eight.
think Indiana is going to make the Sweet 16 though. I do actually.
I think I could be mistaken, but I think you guys took the words out of my mouth. I think Tony Bennett and Virginia. I think they lost to they were the first team to ever lose to a 16 seed like 3 years
That's
ago.
Yeah,
right.
but then they
And
also
then
won
yeah.
the national championship the year
the
later.
very
So.
next year
Yeah.
against UMBC, they beat them, an American East team.
I think they're the pretenders. I'm really hot on Indiana. I like Indiana a lot. I think they're well coached. I think they're well disciplined. I've watched a handful of games of them this year. Beating Purdue was really big. I have a lot of faith in them.
Now, moving to the Midwest region in Kansas City, they say Houston, Texas, Tennessee, and Xavier in there.
I'm
With,
very high on Houston.
Houston's the 4 out of those, definitely. Xavier's too inconsistent. Tennessee looks okay. Texas, I think just Houston's just overall way too strong.
Now,
Houston has to be the favorite, but if we're gonna play spoiler here, which is what we do for entertainment, I would definitely ride with Tennessee. I'm definitely riding that orange wave. I think they're well coached and they're well. They got a lot of they got a lot of size and a lot of strength. So I'm rocking with Tennessee.
like, you see now the next one, the like West region is very tough for me because I feel like those are I would say probably the 3 best teams in the tournament. Like
yeah, and then
overall.
those schools in
like
the West
Kansas,
region
Arizona, Gonzaga. Like
Yeah, Gonzaga's number 1 in offensive scoring right now.
I feel like those are I honestly feel like those are the 3 best teams in the country, in my estimation.
that would make it a fun region, huh?
Well, Gonzaga, I always have to grade them on a West Coast curve. I think Kansas and Arizona, the proof is in the pudding. K-State seems like a wild card. They could be anybody any given day, but I think that's definitely like 3 of the best teams right there, though.
Yeah, definitely. I think Gonzaga. What the biggest thing about Gonzaga is I think they need to be careful who they play. If they play a team that has a really solid
Big man.
center, I think they're in trouble. Like a big
Yeah.
center, I think that will shut down. What's his name?
Timmy.
Timmy. Yep. And that's an X factor for them.
Because Timmy's a finesse guy too. It's not like he's going to be banging.
He's got a nice throw. He's got like a nice little, like you say, finesse him. But you put someone big on him that can just tower him. He's not going to make those shots.
There was a few games this year. It was St. Mary's and Baylor. They got him 2 fouls within the first 10 minutes of the game, and Mark Few could not even recalibrate this team. I think they're so heavily reliant on him, and you saw in the first St. Mary's game early in the season. I think that they really have kind of like a superiority complex when it comes to that relationship, being the senior, in conjunction with the coach. But I have a lot of faith in Mark Few, but they definitely have to have some kind of course correct with how they handle things in the tournament.
And looking out to the East region coming from New York City, we have Purdue, UCLA, Iowa State, and Marquette.
Marquette is going to be a sneaker. I think a lot of teams don't understand the way they play. I think they're very aggressive. They produce a lot of pressure. I think that is like if you don't really do your due diligence and watch how they play, I think they will steal a game from you. Definitely.
We all really feel it for Marquette. I like this big Wee spread.
I do too. Iowa State is a sinking ship. I don't know where they got that from. They lost 7-9. I think Marquette is definitely the best, not the best of the four there, but I think that they have the best outside puncher's chance to take down a UCLA. Purdue, I'll tell you what. I mean,
I was gonna
love
say even Purdue. That you think they could
Who
do
was
that to
who's
Purdue?
the other team?
No, Purdue,
Iowa
Iowa State.
Iowa State. That's not right. Iowa State's like a bubble team this year.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I'm
their
giving you what the committee said.
Is
The
that
committee
up? Is
gave-
that updated? That's like
They
committee-
release
the
it one. They
committee-
release it
one-
right before in mid. They always release it in mid-February.
Oh, I mean, right now Iowa State's like a bubble team.
They're
So,
tanked.
yeah, they completely tanked. So
And,
it's
could've
and
been-
as I
could've been
mentioned,
an
this
early-
could be a factor coming.
Yeah, this
into
is
the
all
after-
subject to change. It's stuff that can change. Yeah.
Right. But I mean,
It's a
again,
better-
you know, I want to run with the Marquette narrative for a second, because I think that we all kind of shit on the Big East kind of being the outside looking in on the Power Five. I think that they could really hang with UCLA and Purdue. I keep hearkening back to our UCLA conversation. They don't really have like a huge win on their resume, and I think that Marquette at least has 3 top 20 wins, in addition to UConn and everybody else in that conference. But I just think that they could sneak up on a team like UCLA or Purdue in that quadrant one.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think like the strongest thing about Purdue, like I said, is you shut down Zach, and Purdue is going to struggle. That's the only thing about them. But other than that, they're two different styles of play. Purdue is a bigger team. They usually they play around Zach. They dish the ball out whenever to try to force the double team to get an open perimeter shot. And then you got Marquette, which is just a bunch of small, fast guards that can pace the floor and give you full court defense all game, and really get you in trouble.
And I look at Coach Matt Painter for Purdue kind of the same way I do with Tony Bennett. It's like it's kind of a guy that's like a familiar face that's been around, and he's kind of acquired like a really good recruitment class year after year and done some good things, but just kind of hasn't really caught up to the hype. Like he hasn't really gotten over the hump in certain respects. So like again, I understand that like Tony Bennett has a championship, but no one's gonna remember that. It's not like they're remembering him like Scott Drew with a championship or what's his face with Bill Self with Kansas. It's like those are iconic coaches that have been inheriting and developing and building programs, and I don't see that playing out with Painter at Purdue. I think that he's a really nice team that's over exceeded their potential in the Big Ten Conference, but they could be beaten, and I think that's kind of the moral of this.
Yeah, I mean he hasn't made a Final Four yet, Matt Painter, as a Purdue coach. He's been there for 18 years, so maybe this is his year.
It's a long time.
The Boilermakers.
Yeah.
Good stuff ahead. So, anyways, guys, now let's put a head on this, and as we wait to see the selection Sunday, I want you to pick your champion right here, right now. And as I mentioned, I really like UCLA. I think they're one of the best teams fundamentally. I believe their experience and improvements year after year with mostly the same squad can only lead them to making some type of deep run, and hopefully they can finally relive the glories like they did in the 70s. And I just think I understand that they haven't had as much competition as some of these other schools, but I think that high basketball IQ from this team can fundamentally overcome the concerns there.
I'm taking Arizona. That's my champion.
All right.
Okay.
Keep it in the
Can I go next,
Pac-12.
Alex?
Yeah, go for it.
You want me to go next?
Yeah.
The underdogs are gonna make it this year. UConn.
Oh,
I believe they can do it. I
Oh,
100% think they can do it. They've beaten Alabama in the tournament at the beginning of the year. I think has to come down to we need to play consistent. We need to control the scoring, and I think it's going to come down to Adamo Sanogo needs to have a really good game offensively.
Is that your team, UConn?
Yeah, UConn, 100%.
oh yeah.
Did you go there or?
No, I wouldn't trade. I'm just a big fan. Big fan of UConn.
Same.
I'll be at the game tomorrow
Yeah,
against DePaul.
Our assistant coach is Quinnipiac's their assistant coach now was the coach at Quinnipiac for a while.
Okay.
Tom Moore.
Right.
So
Okay, yep.
If
I
I
know
can make
exactly
a
who you're talking about.
small comment on UConn, because obviously my heart is rooting for them to go all the way, but no, I mean, just to kind of build off what Brandon said, like I think that if they stay out of foul trouble, because they've had foul trouble all year, playing these big games in the conference. If they can stay disciplined on defense and just get a good shot selection, not just constantly resort to Jordan Hawkins shooting
Chucking up.
ridiculous threes, having good ball movement. I mean, they have a legit 7-footer in Klingon. They have really good 3-and-D guys, Calcaterra and Aline and whatnot, and they have just great coaching. I think that they have all the right pieces in the recipe for a good formula. But if I'm going to be realistic, I mean, it's hard not to pick Houston, just in terms of coaching and defense and getting shots at the right time. I think if I had to pick a team to win it all, I'm gonna just go on a limb. I'm gonna take Tennessee.
Tennessee, okay.
That's a good pick.
Give me Tennessee.
I
Tennessee's
like
good pick.
us being
It's out there.
spread out
I like
throughout
it,
the
though.
country. We have
Right.
we have UCLA, Arizona, Tennessee, and UConn. Imagine if that's a Final Four.
That'd be a pretty good Final Four.
That'd be a pretty good Final Four.
Yeah,
Okay,
that'd be a pretty good one. I'd take
All
that.
right. So I will be talking to you guys 2 weeks from today as we react to Selection Sunday. Then we can pick our Final Fours from there. And hopefully we not only have a lot of fun with this, but it leads to our expertise getting recognized. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Brady Gutierrez, Hayden Nadler, and Alex Ranniello. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Let's enjoy these conference tournaments.
Sounds good.
Have fun, gentlemen.